The old mighty Sparrow. I think it might be time for a quick deck tour because she's set up pretty much the exact same way as she was when she went around the world non-stop through the Southern Ocean, and simplicity is the name of the game. So let's do a quick little tour and show you what it's all about. Now, first and foremost, we got this area, the bowsprit. Now you'll notice there aren't any furling units on either the staysail or the forestay, and essentially my thinking with that is that hang-ons they rarely ever break, and if they do, they're easy to replace. If you've got a furling unit and you're going out to sea for 9 months and that unit breaks down, it's going to be a little bit tough to figure out. So I carry about 5 different jibs, 2 staysails, a couple of storm jibs, and that's what I'm using up here. Now you'll see I essentially don't have any anchor on there. The chain is locked into there. That one is capped. Normally I would remove the entire windlass, but it's kind of a pain for this trip, and I might be anchoring again soon, so we shall see. Now all these little black lines that are all up and down my lifeline are actually to tie off either the drifter or the jib. If I'm dousing it just for a squall, then I don't actually have to remove it completely and bag it up. I can leave it twisted and tied up at multiple points until the squall's over, and then I can go ahead and raise it back up. It's mostly out of just convenience. Now, one of the things with the forestay and the staysail, you know, a lot of people think about when the weather gets heavy, having to be up on that bowsprit. Well, typically you don't actually go up on the bowsprit if the weather's heavy. If you're ahead of the game, I'm going down to my staysail or storm jib, multiple reefs in the main, so I actually never have to go all the way up there. If I'm not on my game and I'm being lazy, that's when I'm gonna get wet, and a good reminder of why I should have my head sail down before the squall hits. Now, this old-fashioned hatch is definitely a bit of a weak point on the boat, but it is bolted down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 times. But I do have a plug which I can screw in from the bottom of marine ply if that thing gets ripped off. You can see it's got about 3-4 inches of sideboard to it, so that's definitely something I've always thought about. But for most of the deck, you can see it's very, very clear of anything. Those are all the jib sheets and staysail sheets, but the spinnaker pole, which is just a whisker pole at this point, that's the only thing I keep up on the foredeck. Both my staysail track and my jib track both have 2 cars for each sheet, and the reason for that is if one of them fails, I have the backup that will catch that line. I can sheet it in and then wrestle it down. My fear was that this would let go because it leads under the Dodger. It would damage the Dodger while it was shaking and going crazy. So I always found that there's plenty of room on the track for 2, and a second one definitely comes in handy. Now, as far as reefing goes, I am pretty unusual, I guess, in the fact that I like to do all the reefing from the mast. So I will ease the sheet in the cockpit, which we'll go over in a bit, but all the rest of the reefing is done right up here. I've got my halyard winch there on the side of the mast. This one is being used for the outhaul, and on the other side it's the reefing one. Once that first reef goes in, the outhaul comes off, and now I can use this winch for the second reef or the third reef. But essentially super old school. Just got that, and I've got my little reefing hook right here on some Spectra so that I can link it in there, tighten that up, and then I go and hit the clue end, and it's all done from up at the mast. Part of the reason I like to do that is that it's good to have the practice being up here, because even if you run everything to the cockpit, you might find that something jams up and you got to come up here anyway. The other thing, probably more key, is that if anything snags, if anything is about to tear, I can and I am up here to witness it and hopefully stop it from happening before it actually does any damage. Now, originally, I definitely was thinking that I would run everything back to the cockpit. So I have multiple blocks up here. This is for my staysail halyard. That's my main sheet, and those are the only 2 that actually run all the way back to the cockpit. I have these extra blocks in case I want to run the main halyard and I want to run the jib halyard back, and then I've got cheek blocks under there, and I can throw a secondary in there. But Again, it's all about keeping this deck as clear as possible. When the waves are crashing, you want nothing for them to grip hold of and let loose, so that you don't ever have to be up here when it gets really, really bad. These Mast pulpits, absolutely a must-have. They make life so much safer when you're dealing with the Mast. Plus, you can use both hands. The old stairs. I really love having the ability to climb this mast without any sort of harness or anything like that, and I can do it really, really quickly and efficiently. Faster is always better. I've had to get up to where that staysail goes in and get right back down as fast as possible. The only problem is obviously you get your halyards caught up in there, but once you learn tricks and get used to it, it's usually not too bad. Now, I like to run with a big traveler, so my main sheet is connected middle of the boom instead of aft, and I can adjust it pretty easily. I do have to come forward to do that, but this big whiteboard here is just to protect my Dodger. If I'm taking big amounts of green water over the deck, this is going to mitigate the force at least a little bit. It's marine ply, it's lashed down. I can pull it off if I want, but essentially it's just protecting my Dodger. Now, Mighty Sparrow, for such a small boat, has check stays. That's what I call them, at least, not running back stays, because they're going in essentially right where the staysail stay is as well. And essentially they're just going to help to keep the mast from pumping when you're headed into some heavy chop, or if you're in really heavy weather, it's just one more stay for the mast. And essentially right now they're in their eased off sort of mode where they're buckled down to a little plate, and then I just tie them to the lower, the aft lower. That keeps them as far out of the way as possible. When they're actually in use, they're gonna get buckled off right here to this shackle, which is a big old fat bolt going all the way through. And again, you just use the windward side one, and it's gonna keep that mast from flexing and changing the shape of your sail. Now, the good stuff, the cockpit. This is my little area. Again, you'll notice that it's very, very clean, very clear of any sort of clutter, but let's get into what we actually have. I spend a lot of time sitting right here in this companionway, especially when it's raining or it's rough, looking out. I'll typically have both of or one of my washboards, which are plexiglass. I can see through them, but this is a great place to like stabilize yourself when the boat's rolling and in heavy weather. But the real fact is I can control basically all the heavy weather sails from standing right here. So I've got my main sheet on a double speed winch. Also got my staysail halyard on the other double speed winch, which are both self-tailing. And then I've got staysail sheet, old school with the cleat, same on the other side. So I can sheet in and out my staysail or storm jib. I can also raise my staysail or storm jib or douse it. And then I can control my mainsail from here as well. Now I've got a clutch right here, which is essentially for the preventer, which I'm always pretty much running with when I'm out at sea. And then on the other side, I have two clutches, one for the staysail halyard, and the other one is just a spare in case that first one fails, or if I do want to run my jib. But again, the biggest thing is that I can do it all from right here, the safety, not only the cockpit, but actually the companionway, which you can't beat it. And if you gotta slam this sucker shut because there's a huge giant wave coming at you, I've definitely done that a few times. And everything else is pretty stock and standard as far as the cockpit goes. Obviously I've got my spray skirts, which definitely help on a west sail for sure. But my primary winches then cleat off back there, super old school. Those are double speed as well. Got my life raft in the footwell. I figure that's pretty much the safest place rather than up amidships. Couple of vents that have porthole covers underneath them for the engine room. Throttle is there, which you always kick with your foot. And then the illustrious, beautiful tiller and Mongo tied up, ready to go. Now I've made a few improvements or strengthened up things on this boat specifically. This was a big project for the trip around the world. The thinking being that if these posts let go, that would at least give me some time to lash things together. But so extra strength there. And then this is a plate of G10 so that the carriage bolts don't just compress all that wood. They're bolted in there. We've got whisker stays coming up, and then dual backstays back there, because running in the Southern Ocean is pretty serious business, and I wanted the safety of having a secondary there. Now, I went with the solar back here. I used to have two until all of this got ripped off in that one storm, including the gallows, including some of the lifelines and the spray skirts and the Dodger. But essentially, I went with just one on here, but I have upped the game. This is 1.5 inch stainless. You could do pull-ups off that if you want. 1.25 inch there is its back strut, and then it has another strut and a huge plate. So this is far, far more structurally sound. I believe that solar panel would rip off well before the actual gallows did. And instead of putting the second one on there, I installed the second up here. This is 180 watts, flexible, and it's just basically tied in. So heavy weather comes, I can go ahead, take this one off, stow it down below, and fold this whole Dodger down forward like I normally would in really bad weather. And just on a side note, for those who are always harping on me to clip in, I do have this. I have used it before. Essentially, when I'm in the cockpit, I can tie off to that. That's got a backing plate of G10 as well, so pretty much not going anywhere unless your tether breaks. So that's pretty much it. That's old Mighty Sparrow in a nutshell. She's simple and easy, and I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel or anything like that, but I can tell you that when it came down to it and we were out at sea for 271 days, the simplicity of the setup was absolutely crucial to keeping things going. You know, obviously we still had things that broke, but it doesn't mean that the whole system didn't fail. We didn't lose the mast, we didn't lose, you know, any of the really crucial systems, and that, I think, is sort of the key to success when you're looking at long distance, long duration ocean sailing. As long as you're not in a big hurry, West Sail 32 is not too bad. It'll beat you up a little bit, but she'll get you home safe and sound and in one piece. You know, last little walk through. Got the cockpit. Slide on by. Through all the reefing lines and halyards and stuff. That's about the only thing you'll ever see laying around on the deck, and those sheets will be attached to sails tomorrow morning. These sails will normally be stowed down below until I actually use them. That's the staysail under there. That pretty much stays on the deck all the time. All right, hopefully you guys enjoyed that, and it maybe shed a little bit of light on it. I know it's a pretty quick little run through. We'll probably do another add on to this once we're actually out sailing. We're going to take off from Fort Pierce again tomorrow, be out for a couple of weeks till we got to return to do some more speaking stuff. So hopefully that was helpful. And I guess one side note, you're going to see any screens up here. There's one compass. I don't have any wind instruments or anything like that. You want to keep that cockpit as dark as humanly possible when you're out at sea. Enjoy the stars. Thanks for watching.